Let me send this up to Zoom right away, but in case we say anything we want to hang on to.
Sure.
Maybe
Sure.
I will. Yeah, so my purpose in doing that, I was actually glad to have the time to try to pound it out, even though it was a ridiculously long monologue. It was fun just to try to put the pieces together. It could be done more efficiently than that. On the other hand, there were a lot of points that were covered, and it went fairly fast. None of it was things you hadn't heard before,
Yeah.
but it was assembled in a way that tried to, let's see, we've done all this stuff before in some way, so why are we doing it again now? What the emphasis now is being at those problem, solutions, resource triplets, or problem, resource, solution triplets, and doing that with some care. The idea is it really the case that the resources make up something like a lens? Is there really something to that idea that there's sort of a model with a finite number of pieces that seem to constitute something like claims or propositions, or stances, or themselves little models or something like that? I'm not quite sure how to individuate them, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if just propositions will do it. I tried a little propositional ladder one time, kind of on a double helix sort of model, or some sort of, the idea is you get a spiral, right? And you sort of climb up with interconnecting pieces. And in that sense, a propositional
Respect
ladder.
for tradition, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm not sure propositions is the right element, to be honest, but you got to start somewhere. It could be little clusters of propositions together form a unit, or it could be there's smaller pieces inside the bigger pieces,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. Hard to say. That I'd say is structure worth exploring, but I want to get at something which is an identifiable whole, which convinces the person who grasps it that they see the world differently out of that whole, and that the resources amassed there and the vision enabled there supports a new way of seeing through to new kinds of solutions to problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to try and do that in more than one piece, because I'm pretty convinced that while there are problems that there are problems that admit of solutions, that admit of reconceptualization.
Just a second, Uncle Tom.
Yeah. You bet.
I am. What, can I do something for you quickly? Okay. All right. Sorry.
No problem.
Probably cooking dinner or something. That was Erin, by the way. Probably haven't seen her in a while.
Half a face or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see.
Please say hi to her and thank her for allowing me to be a guest in her home.
I will.
Virtual guest in her home for a few minutes.
Yeah. Let's see. Just to sort of, I think the lens, how to actually think about constructing the lens. What is the lens actually? So that's what you're talking about, right? Is it constructed of propositions, or propositions making up smaller things?
Yeah.
Or making up larger things, and then that's
right. Are there larger units than propositions that together nest inside? Is every model a lens? Is every little model of anything a lens? In a way it is, right? It's how you see something, it's something more limited.
Certainly.
And then you bring a few of them together and you start to generate analogies, connections between this model and this model, right? Things like that. Those analogies get, it seems to me those are sort of multiple model by their very nature.
Yes.
Analogies are.
Yeah.
And if a single lens trades on an analogy, now it's got units that may be bigger than propositions, unless a single proposition is the model. Maybe a single proposition could be a model. I actually don't have a ton of experience thinking through all this stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, yeah, I'm trying to apply this. So, like, something I've been thinking about is U.S. foreign policy. And so, like, reading Noam Chomsky's books, there's definitely a different frame, a different lens at looking through, basically looking at the behavior of U.S. on the global stage. He has a different lens than something I'm familiar with, and it's really obvious that there's a different. And he has all sorts of tools that he's bringing to bear to analyze U.S. foreign policy, and he has certain things that it seems like he just has certain things that he weights more than others in the analysis. And so I'm trying to get to think of like a proposition that I'm trying to think of a group of propositions that would fit into something larger that would in that particular I'm not fluent enough in his language to be able to do that for him, but that would probably be a good indicator that I actually understood what he was saying. But I'm just trying to make it more specific. Maybe there might be something more.
No, that's helpful. Why don't we give it 5 or 10 minutes right now and see if we can come up with it? Because Mike, if you're up for it, because my guess, you've read more of him than I've read of him. I've been hanging around him probably longer, but not intensely, right? Yeah. So maybe I've been thinking longer about the general frame that he might be using, or the general approach, but I don't know when he thinks that well. So I would sort of substitute a Caitlin Johnston worldview for Noam Chomsky worldview. They're not radically misaligned. It seems to me that there's going to be a lot of overlap between those.
Yeah, that's probably what I would end up doing too, to be honest, because I've certainly read more of her than I have of Chomsky too.
That's probably not fair to Chomsky, but and I wouldn't. I haven't heard as much emphasis. Obviously, Caitlin Johnson jumps up and down in there, right? I mean, that's her beginning, middle, and then the end. That's sort of the hub, right, around which revolves all the things that she says and thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, actually. There's other important pieces in her too. Inner work, outer work. You can't change on the outside until you change on the inside is also core. Yeah. Right. In her thinking, which doesn't have anything to do with narrative, or it probably everything has something to do with narrative, but it doesn't just fall right out of her stance on narrative.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard Chomsky so much emphasize that, but he knows so much. It's hard to tell.
Oh, he certainly does in the book that I'm reading about the Cold War, the narrative of defensive war is certainly the U.S. basically talking about its operations in the world during the Cold War as defensive. And for national security, it's a particular narrative that they use to justify. So he talks about narrative all the time, and then both in that case, and then in the way we use trade agreements, we have a particular narrative for that. One of bringing capital to bear to invest in developing communities. So we have a particular narrative about the flow of wealth in the trade agreements that we make. One of us enriching and bringing the modern neoliberal capitalist structure, making it available for these developing countries, rather than a narrative of shortchanging the developing nations' economic development on using their own resources and their own expertise.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a couple different.
This, of course, is where Caitlin Johnston has so much to say about Donald Trump, because Trump doesn't pretend that narrative, right? Trump says, take their oil.
Yeah.
Trump says, let's make America rich again.
Right.
And the way she puts it, he's exactly like every other president. He's just, except he's bald-faced, naked, unabashed, telling it like it is. Not that he doesn't lie. Yeah, he does.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't only lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
doesn't only lie.
Yeah.
That's a. Do you mean that? I take that to mean that most. Maybe this isn't what you meant, but I thought it was funny thinking about it this way. But that U.S. presidents only lie about their intentions.
Politicians do, but I wasn't really attacking all of politicians. I was acknowledging the fact that he can lie in the most shameless way that a person ever could. He's a shameless liar and a shameless truth teller.
Yeah.
Right? And generally, he's just shameless. Right? And that's, mostly a vice, but many people find it attractive. And there is something attractive to it. There's some bravado about it, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's so many people say he says what we're all thinking, right? And when they say that, they mean to praise what he's saying. He's just finding a way to spin it, but without lying about it. Those people, right? They're just, this guy shouldn't be a judge in my case. He's Mexican. Most people won't come out and say that. Right?
Yeah.
He's saying what we're all thinking though. Right?
Yeah.
That I think that's sort of how people follow it. That's why they follow him. He's a leader in that respect. Anyway, that didn't mean to digest him too much, but that. Well,
there's an honesty to it, and some.
There is. There is a straight. It's a different tact. Yeah. It's sort of like he pounds people with like a salesman, right? He insists on a certain line, and he does, as what's her name, his niece says, he just doubles down. You can't show any weakness. So whatever it is he's accused of doing, of course I did that, and I'm doing it much worse, and it's the best thing that ever happened to you, right? It's a complete turn it around in a show of strength. And so a lot of times that runs right down the center. A lot of times he's very straightforward about what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Of course we're going to kill him. Of course we're going to take the oil. It belongs to us by right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we really did lose focus there. I just thought it might be worth trying to assemble like 3 claims that do some work.
Yeah.
That resonate and that spin the world around and make you see things differently. Make you see trade agreements differently, make you see wars differently, make you see international right, things that U.S. does, right, on the national stage. Stick up for human rights, ensure fair trade. What are the good things the U.S. does? Stick up for international rights, defend freedom, and stick up for
promote democracy or something like that. Yeah,
and that's right, democracy,
Yeah.
democracy, market, human rights, and maybe the other one I said was freedom, which dovetails in democracy.
Yeah.
Something like that. But all our use of force, right, is for defensive. It's all our allies are freedom fighters.
Right.
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 And all our enemies are terrorists.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Or totalitarians, or
Yeah, that's right.
Communists. Yeah. Or socialists, or worse.
Not much worse.
So. Yeah. I guess.
So what is it he thinks about the world that transforms all of those? He looks at everything with a different set of lenses, and I can put that hat on too now. So we ought to be able to say, I think you probably can too. So from reading enough of them, so what is it? What are the main pillars of the fact of the real story?
Yeah.
Right. We're a nation run by very powerful, rich people. That's got to be somewhere in there. You can put it better than that, but you might say we're an oligarchy, not a democracy.
Yeah.
Something like that. Corporate, government, state, corporate merger, right? All that. That's what really runs things. So that's one.
Yeah, and with regard connecting that to foreign, are we trying to stay specific to foreign policy here?
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Why don't?
Right, and so when we act, so just sort of contrasting it with our democracy proposition from the last one, we're not acting to promote. I just think it's a fundamental shift in the interests, like in as advertised, we're acting in the interest of the freedom fighters there in that country, right?
Yes, right.
And trying to promote democracy there for the sake of the citizens, freedom-loving citizens in that particular country, and then also that as a benefit to freedom-loving people everywhere.
Yep. And all that ties into our fundamental language, our founding language. So there are rights, there are human rights behind all this, even if we don't say it as much as Jimmy Carter used to say it or somebody like that. Right? Yeah. We're still basically supporting it.
Yeah. And so
those are our principles.
Yeah.
Here's who runs us, and here's the principles they run us according to. Right? Yeah. And it's basically everybody that runs us. Right? And we're dedicated to these principles. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Yeah. 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 And so I guess what we're talking about with the oligarchy democracy difference is that we are enforcing those principles, or we are promoting those principles on behalf of the mandate of the masses, of the citizens. Like us as the citizens, as a democracy, are actually trying to promote those there. And so I think his the Chomsky's proposition would be, or a different, whoever, I'm sure there's lots of people who think this, but that we are in fact an oligarchy, and when we're acting in the world on behalf of democracy, we're actually, it's just we're acting in the interest of those people.
We're trying to take other people's money and resources. We're trying to take their wealth. We're trying to make America rich again, right? Yeah. Because everyone's cheating us. Here now, I'm quoting our president, right, who's telling it in a surprisingly different narrative, right? We deserve all that. We are the best nation on earth. We're remarkable. Everybody owes everything to us, right? And instead, in a show of weakness, we run around the world like our last president did and apologize, right, for our excesses, right? And instead, we ought to make them pay,
Yeah.
That's the different narrative.
Yeah.
But yeah,
What's the proposition here?
yeah. The proposition, I think, is that we are. Um, the proposition is that the world socioeconomic order is run by the very few for the very few.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's how that if you want to understand how the world works, that's how it works. It doesn't work the way if they tell you it works,
Yeah.
first of all. And what are they after? They are not after the principles that they that are used. That's a smokescreen.
Yeah.
They're after getting as enriching their hold, enriching their empire, enriching their hold on wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not done. And I think with regards to U.S. foreign policy, that's not done by creating stability. I think
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
right. Right.
Um,
It's not connected to that.
we want it. We want stability in Israel, right?
Yeah.
Because they're part of the cabal. We want stability in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but the reason we want stability in those places is I think it creates a net instability. Like those, like the only reason we're able to go in and take what we want, the only reason we're able to funnel taxpayer dollars into the arms industry, into the military industrial complex, is because of the instability that those places create for us.
Yeah, but I think it seems to me it's a little more. I think it's a little more fine grained than that. I think instability is a tool, and we apply it. We want to be able to apply it where it's of use to us. We want to destabilize our enemies.
Yeah.
But we want to stabilize the order that pulls in resources for us. We're no fans of instability in itself.
That's true.
I think.
That's true. Yeah.
So law and order, international law and order, just like domestic law and order, could be a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Unless we want to cut the rug out from somebody who's not cooperating with us. We don't want our enemies to be stable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so there's a couple of propositions, and something tells me there's a third one. That is that among the more effective tools for pursuing these goals, these principles that we really operate on, right?
Yeah.
To benefit these people that we're really operating for, among those are narrative control, in being intensely good at narrative manipulation.
Yeah.
And so we have agencies for that. We have professional organizations for that. That's one tool. And another tool is an unbelievably large machine. And there may be some sub themes here, like you have to feed that machine. This may not be, you may not want instability in itself, but you might need it to sharpen the saw. Right? You got to keep your army engaged. So you want a big military, and conflicts are probably good for us. Occasionally a good war. If we need to circle the wagons. And there's more fine tune in there, but it depends on how important the military industrial complex, I might as well finish that word, right? Or that phrase, right? It depends on how big how big a piece of the economy is that? Who are the players in that? How many people have a piece of that versus how many people have a place in other things? And now there's plenty of room inside that narrative for all kinds of fault lines, because you've got lots of rich people who get rich doing different stuff. So they have
Yeah.
different interests. And that's what's really going on in political life is those folks are moving, shaking, manipulating always.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think something like that is the world. And now if we wrote those things down, there's some pretty powerful models in there, like narrative manipulation is a tool for international control or something like that. That's
Yeah.
not just a proposition. That's a pretty high level. Maybe I'm being naive when I say not just a proposition. Maybe that's kind of naive. I mean, what can't you put in a single sentence? Just abstract a little further.
Right.
Right? Make your subject a little more complex. Pick up your learned at eternity, even in the writing program, right? Pick up your predicate and turn it into an adjective, right?
Yeah.
And now
Right.
you're talking about a something, and now what do you want to say about that something, right? And you're just grinding more and more, diving deeper and deeper.
Right. Right.
So it wouldn't be simply
Yeah.
propositions.
Yeah.
And at some point, these are more powerful abstract ideas.
Yeah. So how does that?
Yep.
So I guess how does that fit back into our lens model? Which is, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think like that narrative construction as a tool for uh, the maintenance of oligarchical power or something like that. Like obviously we could refine that, n ways up and n ways down, and lots of things go into that, and probably not as many things as go into it, but there are things that are built on top of that too. So how does that map onto what we're talking about with the lenses then?
I think in the following way, the reason I thought it would be good for us to spend a few minutes, we spent a few more than I thought, 5 or 10, it's probably 10 or 20, but good conversation, was to see if we could actually convince ourselves that in a preliminary way that we could do better with more care. We can identify some number, some finite number and not a super large number of propositions, which when you put them together constitute a transformational way of approaching issues that you could call a different lens.
Yeah.
Because you really see things differently. You assess probabilities differently. Somebody says something, you say, that's unlikely to be true. Why? Right? Because you've got a different backstory, a different lens.
I mean, I think, it's so clear to me that that's the case, that there's value in thinking about looking at the world through models that way. It's just a matter of like, how conscious are you and which lens you're using, right? I mean, like I would say in the last 2 months, I now have a totally different lens for looking at U.S. foreign policy, just based on what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like I could switch to my old lens, but now it looks distorted. And so, like, what's the value of that other lens? I guess I don't. What is like? Let's take a lens that was that the narrative construction experts made to intentionally misrepresent the reality of the world. I mean, I guess it's a lens. It's a purposefully bad lens, or it's like looking in a house mirror or something.
It's a lens that's not designed to inform. It's designed to misinform.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can construct a lens for that purpose.
Yeah.
You don't want people to know what you're actually doing. You want them to think the opposite from what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Gaiji's ring, right? That little ring. You want to turn it and make yourself invisible.
Yeah.
Because then you can get away with all kinds of shit.
Right.
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 And
Okay.
people think
Yeah.
nobody's there when in fact somebody is there. Right. Or they think it's, yeah. They think the king did it. They think, no, the king didn't do it. The king was framed.
Yeah. Well, I guess the only reason I was going down that train of thought just to think about trying to push back on the lens idea, but I just don't think.
I see.
You know, yeah, just thinking about valid lenses.
Yeah.
Or informative lenses versus misinformative lenses.
Kind of like giving somebody a broken sword in a fight.
Yeah.
People want tools, and you want them to use a tool that's not going to be effective against you. You want to use the tools that are effective against them, and you want them to have a tool that they think will be effective against you.
Yeah.
Right? So, or against whatever their enemy is. It'd be better if they didn't even know that was you.
Right. Right.
Right. Everything comes back to the Republic, right? Although they would praise you to your face if you praise justice, right?
Yeah.
They'd mock you behind your back.
I'm sure if we wanted more analogies or tools of this kind, we could look at Christian thought about the devil or something. Right.
Yeah.
I bet you there's all sorts of thought experiments and, screw tape letters.
Well, we could
screw tape letters would be just a yeah.
Right.
I guess a different. So you're looking at something different there, but anyway.
Send you some band I like whose name I forget did a really nice rendition of they did a song on screw tape letters.
Oh yeah.
I'll send it to you when I can think of the band's name. Kind of fun to listen to.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that right. So lenses are tools.
Yeah.
And we construct them and we misconstruct them. Both misconstructed tools and well-constructed tools. They may be misconstructed in one sense, well-constructed in another sense, well-constructed to mislead, well-constructed to under-inform.
Yeah.
Right? But not well-constructed to inform.
Yeah.
So there's a warfare, in a certain sense, a battle for these tools.
Yep.
And these tools do seem like you can, it does seem helpful. I mean, you couldn't turn the lights on in foreign policy. You couldn't really look at foreign policy differently with just one of these propositions, right? I mean, just imagine, take the whatever view you used to hold and just add to it, right? That people can manipulate narratives, right? For foreign, it's an effective foreign policy tool, right? That by itself won't change your view very much. It will fit right into your other view. Right. It would be,
Absolutely.
Well, of course they do. That's why we have Voice of America, right? Because we combat false narratives, right, et cetera. And it doesn't change a thing.
That's why we don't listen to RT. That's why we don't care about Assange. Right?
That's right. And this is why we ought to ban Russian propaganda and their mouthpieces. Or maybe that's not the way it would go. But anyway, that sort of thing. You can add in one of these things, and it's not transformative, not very much. Right? It might have been if you were unbelievably naive about something, and you might get a little bit of an education about that. And now you're not so naive about it anymore.
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you realize that, hey,
More
this is
variables to
basically the
consider.
same story, but, right, you got to put your big boy pants on now. You got to open your eyes a little bit, right? And now you're on the same team, but you're a little bit more experienced.
Yeah.
Whereas some other kinds of narrative transformations will make you question. They won't just alter your narrative, your overall narrative by adding a new proposition. You add 2 or 3 of these propositions, and they subvert your narrative.
Yeah.
You can't hold that old narrative anymore. So you couldn't, and maybe there's single propositions that could do that. So take the old story, move out the narrative control piece, right? This is sort of your naive, the junior high school all-American story, right? Something like that. Hasn't thought about it real hard, doesn't know a lot, right? Just has some values, has a basic story, right? Knows a few things. So I'm going to say, I think 12, 13, 14-year-olds, this is about the right age, somewhere in there. And now just move in that all the people that the way the world really works is very wealthy people control what's happening for their own interests.
Yeah.
I'm just playing with this idea. I'm wondering if there's some propositions that do more damage to it. And that's got to be the case, right?
Yeah.
That one's like it doesn't tell you how to see things differently yet.
Yeah.
But it shakes the foundation a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it seems to generate some contradictions. Well, wait, I mean, that couldn't be right because, like, we went to war to stop the Nazis, right? We fought against Japan. We were, this was America's greatest generation. Maybe this has to be a 14-year-old now. Just had 9th grade U.S. history.
Mm-hmm.
But that couldn't be true if the way the world's really run is really wealthy people manipulate things in order to serve their own interests.
Yeah.
It must be the case that that's only true to some limited extent, right? So there's a contradiction. Start to make a distinction. But the point is you've inserted a contradictory single proposition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that certainly would be there's always just the reality of having to do the work of thinking through implications, right? Of actually,
Yep.
Anyway, that's sort of off topic.
That's actually very helpful because from my point of view, that's very helpful. When we go to the next lens, we talk about consciousness and consciousness is being defined by perspective, and perspectives being limited.
Yeah.
One way that's expressed might be in the amount of energy that it takes to actually get to a conclusion. It's like you can't get there. You can't see it. It's not part of your perspective right now. You have a much more limited perspective. You have not been able to just flesh out the implications of the several things that you think.
Yeah.
You haven't been able to put 2 and 2 together. Can't see the 4 yet. And that takes time. And it does take time. It takes experience. That seems to me the brain's doing that all the time.
Yeah.
From a neuroscience, limited neuroscience grasp, it sounds to me like that's what the brain is always doing.
Yeah.
It's perceiving in the categories that it has.
Right.
It's working with the categories that it has, and it's taking in data. It's predicting what's going to happen next based on the categories that it has, and trying to find its way forward, trying to make the model it has a successful model, right? And trying to change the world on that model into one that's more pleasing. Something like that. So it's taking things in and it's filing them under those categories. And then just to jump to Jeff Hawkins for a moment in neuroscience, just for 1 minute, and this I think you have to repeat this like a mantra. I do. What happens is you get pieces that don't fit very well. Sometimes your predictions don't come to be so. It's not exactly what you expected, and you have to somehow revise your categories. And those revisions sort of work their way up. You have to push these higher level. You have to abstract to a new level. You have to have a more complicated story to tell.
Yeah.
But then eventually, with experience, those complicated stories filter their way back down to be the fundamental categories of your experience.
Yeah.
So what you see here, for example, is you see dissimulation. That's what you see right on the face of it. You see a spin. This is spin control. And you recognize it instantly, right? It's not an exception to the general rule that you should trust adults, right? Or something like that you learned as a kid, right? That all those exceptions have worked their way in different shapes, different forms. You've got different categories you now see in that are more sophisticated. And they eventually get pushed back down, and they get pushed back down somehow through experience. It takes a lot of time to push them back through, and there's literally a rewiring. There's a creation, right? There's a bringing together of the exceptions, the generation of the new categories, right?
Yep.
And those new categories require real hard work. You don't see in terms of them. You have to file shit under them again and again and again, and then you start to believe in them somehow, right? And then you start to advance them sort of by force of habit, right? And now they're starting to get pushed back down, but all that takes experience. And that's why they say the difference between the expert vision and the non-expert vision is the expert, it's not hard to be an expert. It's super simple for the expert. He just sees it with different categories. It's just obviously not that. That was obviously not an attempt for this wide receiver to run back and catch a pass. That was obviously a head and shoulder fake, right? That he just threw at me, and I did not bite, right? And I stayed with him like that kind of expert tracking comes with experience. It comes with 10,000 hours of experience, all this sort of literature they have on expert. You have to play for a long time before you get that.
Yeah.
And now you just see it that way. You didn't see a guy going back. You saw a guy putting a predictable move on you. And you didn't even think about biting. So beating that to death. But that's a nice illustration, I think, of all right. So
absolutely. Yeah. No, I really like that. I was thinking of it in the frame of like integration techniques. But
say more.
Well, I was thinking about, this is just all the same, rehashing exactly what you said, but if you think about trying to teach integration to juniors at Trinity or something, you give, they're learning different techniques. They're learning U substitution. They're learning biparts. They're learning, the trigonometry, what to look for. They're learning all these different tools. But there's a huge difference between we're learning U substitution. And in these problems, you're going to use U substitution to solve these problems, right? And knowing that on the front. But then at the end, you have all these tools in your math toolbox, and you're just given a set of a bunch of problems that you need to figure out. And you're just like, it is a testament to how well you actually, how much of an expert are you in integration techniques? How do you know when to use the right tools? Can you just look at a problem and know what technique to apply? Or do you need to like try some out because you actually don't know what you're looking for? Or maybe you just can't see far, like maybe you can't just look at a problem and see all the implications of it, right? I mean, that was my experience of getting better at calculus, was I can just look at a problem and see just part of this is like I can just do a lot of the problem in my head, at least abstractly.
Yeah.
And so I can just see the implications of different techniques.
Right.
At a glance, it's not hard for me.
Right.
Right. But I've just done a lot of them. And I just know what the implications of different things are going to be right away.
Yeah.
They're just sort of available to me right away. Whereas someone who's learning, there's actually not that, they actually can't see all the information that the problem is telling them.
Right.
There is a just level of just,
no, that totally.
I don't know.
It is just like that. It's exactly why you have to tell bright mathematics students, bright and lazy mathematics students who are inclined to take shortcuts, why you have to beat into their head, don't take that many shortcuts. I mean, by all means, get really good at taking shortcuts, by all means, and then do every problem anyway, right? Or nearly every problem anyway.
Yeah.
Don't just tell yourself, oh, I can do 3 of these problems, and now I get it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to see it with that. What happens is it slows you down, right? The further and further you go, you just don't see the problem anymore. It takes you forever just to figure out the problem, what the problem is, right? And you gain no practice solving those, or you're dead. You've hit your ceiling.
Yeah.
I used to call that, of course, we taught at a school where they taught boys and girls separately, right? And I call that smart boys math disease. Right? That was that sort of laziness, because I had big time. I wasn't that smart either, by the way. I really wasn't that gifted at mathematics, but gifted enough that I could.
The scale is
somebody else, right? And I was not even in the, I was in the slow. I was in a class of school that didn't have calculus. Sorry, didn't have algebra through the 8th grade. So I had to take high school algebra in the 9th grade, which meant I didn't get a look at calculus until I hit the university. So, you still with us? Oh yeah, good.
It says my internet connection is unstable, but
I thought so. Yeah, you kind of looked strangely the same for a moment.
Yeah, but so anyway, I think I'm tracking with what you're saying, but it is interesting to me to think about this as using math as sort of a way of.
It's super interesting
because it's just like, why do you like a question that is why do we learn math? I mean, I think it is an interesting and not obvious question. And I mean, it's in some ways it's obvious, but anyway, I've been thinking about, I'd like to have a good answer for that question. And I think having a good answer to that question, I think there's something in this model that we're talking about that could provide a piece of a good answer to that question. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I do too. To digress one tiny bit more, I'd also like an answer to why do we love music? Which I see that as a related question to why do we think mathematically? Seems to me we are mathematical creatures, actually, and in music you experience mathematics all the time, right? Your body feels it. You can't tell. Unless you're well trained, right? You can't tell whether that was a semi, hemi, demi, quaver or not. The only musical word I know for a 64th note or something like that. So you can't tell that, but your ear doesn't miss a trick, right? If that note isn't exactly right? If the rhythm isn't exactly where it was, and you can pick it up, you get it in your head on one listen practically. You hear one really good guitar solo one time, you will not forget it, right? And I'm being
attacked by a cat right now.
Oh, nice. Good kitty.
Sorry, this
Anyway,
kitten,
that's a big.
this kitten just jumped up and knocked my headphones off, Uncle Tom. So I missed the last 10 seconds there.
Anyway, I was just enjoying the way that how quickly we pick up on music, and
Yes.
how well
Yeah.
we remember it, and how easy it is to tell when a note is gone, and what the heck is up with that, right? Why do we love music?
Yeah.
That somehow we're in a mathematical world there.
Yeah.
Right. It seems to me we don't necessarily have a language for it, but music is a language for it. It's just not. It's a different kind of language. But we solve problems with music all the time. We know what the next notes are.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a solution to a problem in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's what is going to come next? I don't know. Let me think. Right. No, you don't have to think. You know exactly what's going to come next, or at least you know what ought to come next. And
yeah.
Yeah, and
or
sometimes
a set of answers that anyway, we keep going down to it.
That's right. We could. Sometimes with songs you've never even heard, you know what's going to come next. And the same thing is true in the score, by the way. I'm watching a show now that I love a lot, but it's incredibly predictable. And I joke all the time, this thing writes itself. And I finish their sentences for them all the time. And sometimes I'll jump forward, 5 minutes into the story and say, watch. I said last night to my wife, I'm just ask me when we're done, right? This is the point right here. Ask me, did I know that was going to happen, right? And I'll tell you what I thought was going to happen. And of course, it was a surprising, unbelievable twist. Well, it was predictable, surprising, unbelievable twist, right?
Yeah.
Because we've seen a few narratives, we know what surprises people, and we know when you pick up the patterns of writers yanking your chain, and you know they're going to yank your chain again, and it is musical. Right? Except it's in plot. It's not in notes, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I just always think of like what would just an avid liberal defender of the arts say to something like describing us as mathematical beings, like someone who hates math and someone who thinks that math robs the world of beauty, or
if he or she were a real defender of the classical liberal arts, he or she would know about what is it, the 7 traditional, what's the tritium and the quadrivium. These are names just popping back in my head. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric are the tritium maybe, and the quadrivium are they're basically the ones that Plato outlines in the education of the philosopher. They are geometry. Their geometry certainly is geometries amongst them. Plato makes distinctions between different levels of geometry, and then he seems to advance. He seems to look to calculus. And he talks about astronomy, but not astronomy in a sense of where the actual planets are, but where they have to be. Something like that. So he's thinking about all those different layers, right, of mathematics, and those were eventually captured, if I remember, in the quadrivium. Quadrivium, the seven liberal arts. So I'm just saying, mathematics education we don't actually need to apologize for. In the liberal arts tradition either.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we apologize for it. I'm suggesting what are they missing? What's missing from an account that feels like math cheapens or patterns that it's just patterns, satisfying patterns, and being able to recognize the that's what makes it something nice. That's what makes something beautiful is just, I don't know, a satisfying pattern of events or notes or
but patterns you don't even see necessarily.
Right. Yeah, you just feel that you feel or hear or
how about an elegant proof, for example? you don't know what an elegant, if you don't marvel at an elegant proof or an incredibly nice solution in coding, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, a very efficient algorithm. Or then you're just, it's as if you're tone deaf.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You might as well.
There's something less intuitive about it, obviously.
Yeah, you don't pick it up as early.
Yeah.
It's
Like
not that
animals like music, you know.
Well, infants do.
What'd you say?
Infants like music, right?
Yeah.
You can sing before they talk, practically.
Yeah.
I mean, they pick up, but they don't code before they talk. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting down to this thing.
Yeah, we did. But so to swing back and put a cap on this, then we were just talking about lenses and constructing lenses out of. There may be smaller models inside them that you can. I think we've seen in the Chomsky International Narrative that with a few propositions, you can generate a pretty substantial different lens. And you could see a lot of things very, very differently, that in a way that seems to rest on not very many propositions that one would try on. As you pointed out, you can try these things on. This is enormously important, and I made a big deal out of this in that last narrative, talking about this second first language competency almost ad nauseum, right? But literally, you can take on someone else's perspective, learn someone else's perspective, and come back and see yourself from someone else's point of view, just to take that point, right? So these are things you can apparently try on, as you were pointing out when you said, I still remember what I used to think, right? And maybe, right, there's still questions about which of those lenses you ought to use and when, or is there some lens that brings them together in some way?
Yeah.
Some further lens that brings them together. And yeah, and there we're right in the thick of the dynamic that we were talking about in that first lens construction. That high information flow network of rich communities is a very big lens, right? It's a big lens. It's got a dozen parts. Sorry, we've lost each other maybe.
I think I'm good. I was just
Here?
concerned about noise on my side, so I'm just gonna mute myself. I can just hit the space bar and jump back.
Be careful, sit back too hard and you will flatten the cat.
There's a kitten here,
I see.
and it likes my headphones.
Yeah.
It's astonishingly persistent in its quest for attention.
Nice kitty.
Yeah. Okay. No, we're good, Uncle Tom.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So this was kind of helpful. Just in taking a little bit deeper dive into. I think as we go forward, it would be useful to watch for synergies like this. It'd be nice to pick up a lens where it's there, right? So that international relations lens, it's pretty nice to see that. In fact, one could make a study, there'd be a craft of articulating a lens in a particularly clean and powerful way and introducing the premises in a plausible way to a particular audience. And that's, Plato had a fancy word for that, education, right? Remember in the metaphor, the allegory of the cave. Sorry, we still well enough connected?
Here, I'm with you.
your visual seems choppy. In
Yeah.
that allegory of the cave, right, where he says, I won't repeat the whole thing, but we're chained and looking at a wall, shadows on the wall, a prisoner comes,
Yeah.
somebody liberates a prisoner, turns him around, sees other things he's lost at first, right, develops new patterns, sees more and more as he ascends out of the cave, right? It's tough going. At first he's blind. At first he seems foolish. It'd be especially seem foolish if he ever came back and tried to say what he saw, right? But eventually, knowing with more powerful models, putting language into Plato's words here, more powerful ideas, right? You bring that grasp back down into the world of the everyday, and you see more sharply, but only eventually. Right? You have to apply those models with experience. And all that sounds exactly like this neuroscience little trip we just took, right? It does a lot. And then he says, and now you can see that education isn't what some people say, just dropping knowledge into your head as if it weren't there. Instead, it's turning the soul and getting it to see things differently from a different point of view, right? So it's turning the soul. That's what that craft is, of introducing a lens, right, of refining those ideas so that there's a harmony between these things, and the whole thing illuminates. Together those things illuminate, and there is a way in. You can turn the soul. There's a craft of turning the soul, which is a craft of introducing someone to that lens so that they can more quickly, more efficiently put it on, at least imaginatively. I mean, at first only imaginatively, probably. How can you believe it until you understand it? You can seem to believe it, you can want to believe it, but you don't actually, you can assent to the claim that it's true, but you can't believe it until you understand it, and you can't understand it until you see through it, right? So at first imaginative.
Yeah.
That seems right.
Yeah.
And then the lights go on better with it. Yeah, that's what lens is. And that's what education is. So you could see then this project, the Resurrecting Civility project, if we simply did one thing only, if we simply articulated the high information flow network of rich community lens and found a way of making that plausible and getting that across and inviting a range of people to come in and to grasp it and to see that plausibility, it would transform their view of a lot of things. And that list of a lot of things ought to correspond to the problems in the problem, resource, solution triplet. But now I think we know better than to think of a resource as necessarily a single proposition. A resource might be a couple of propositions together, right? That are sufficient to build an alternative picture of the sort that you needed more than one, maybe you needed 3 or 4 to turn the tables on your view of international relations.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I just think it's so, there's there's certainly, it's amazing the interest, how interesting it is to talk to an expert in a field where you're just learning about it. And so, like, what I was talking to someone the other day who had read Chomsky for years, and that was his lens. And I was just talking about one of the books that I'd been reading and just sort of like how it was framing my interpretation of current events. And it was amazing to talk to that person about it, because they just saw, they were able to just be like, yeah, this is, but this is what that is kind of right, but also all of these things, and was just able to take the implications and see way more implications, uh, and make it look so easy. It was almost depressing, that's like, but it really is just a, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I wonder, I guess it just, there's something amazing about that, just sort of, yeah, I guess just mastery of material. And uh, I wonder how, let's see, I wonder why this person gravitated towards that lens in the first place. It seems to me that there's definitely a sort of person who uh, gravitates towards uh, particular lenses, or just is skeptical of particular traditional lenses from a younger age, uh, and chooses to build their own lens, or uh, picks a different set of lenses in a just pretty consistent way. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But people are, I guess it's just a comment on people being different. But
Right. But then the question is, what's the upbringing? I mean, I skirted on that summary that I did last Friday, right? What you don't want to only parallel process. You don't want to only learn from people like you, or slight divisions of labor, right? Between otherwise like-minded people, right? Who
yeah,
divide and conquer the whole pie. That's very efficient and probably very fun. You feel like you're on a team. Everything's awesome when you're part of the team. What's that little song kids sing? But
yeah,
anyway, you gotta, from the beginning, um, for early on, you gotta learn that there are other people who see things different, right?
yeah,
And you gotta have you could grow up in a family where mom and dad both saw things differently, or uncles and aunts or respected people had different views. That would do it. If people you loved had different views, you would very quickly understand that there are different views, and you have to work to understand them,
yeah,
right? So that could be one source. But what is that education like?
yeah,
Wouldn't you have to be good at that? But and the way I put it the other day, in fact, several times we put it this way, is how do you do that without making gray? In other words, without eliminating the the structural integrity of like-mindedness and the efficiencies of processing together,
yeah,
right? How do you not erode that and yet recognize that there are other ways of doing that? But you can't call into question everything you think all at the same time, or you end up, and Plato warns against it in his dialogues, you end up being a mythologist. You end up hating reason. You don't think it can carry you anywhere. You distrust everything,
yeah,
right? And you can't get off the ground with other people. You can't do big things together.
yeah,
At least with, or put it this way, you could run into that difficulty. So those are maybe naive or maybe overly simplistic outlining of some options. But
yeah,
somehow it does seem like it's not very good. We're in this situation today. It's not very good that we have no long-term dedicated holistic accounts, attempts to form those holistic accounts, attempts to live them out together. Very, very few. That's a relatively rare or weird thing to do. And instead, we haphazardly pick up people who happen to resonate with us around our favorite issues. And some of that resonance is on practical matters. This is who we get stock advice from. This is who we go to get our cars fixed. This is who we take our beer drinking tips from, right? Or something like that, you know. But those are arbitrary, they're haphazard trust relationships that get formed, right? And then, and maybe it's the case we feel pretty empty because of that. And this is perhaps why we jump on so quickly to a wish and a prayer that we could be parallel processing together. All of us like-minded people who know all those other people don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? We do see, we tribalize, right? Why are we doing that? And why do we cluster into the ridiculous tribes that we seem to cluster into? Unthinking, ridiculous, and utterly unaware of the need to learn from one another, right? And it's as if the virtue of intellectual honesty is out the window. The virtue of charitable interpretation is out the window. Why the hell, right? It seems somehow because we lack what we badly need, which is a kind of efficiency to make our way through all this information that comes from operating in bigger pods than we operate in, to use a whale analogy.
Yeah.
You got to hunt in bigger packs, right? Something like that, and hunt in more sustained, coordinated ways and live them out like a pod does of killer whales. And the fact that it seems like that's one analysis anyway of where we are, is that we're hunting and searching for that. We're starving for it. We don't have it. And so we form it badly. And we throw out the baby with the bathwater when we do it, right? Yeah. We throw out the genuine sources of information and the diversity of perspective and the value of that. We throw that whole piece out because it threatens us as we try to grab together some kind of coherence for ourselves, which we'll defend unthinkingly, right? Without introspection and without genuine listening.
Yeah.
We seem to be moving more and more in that direction, and it's got to be a symptom. That's not just a cause, that's a symptom. The fact that it happens all over the place, I think, is a symptom of our lack of awareness, that lack of understanding how this, I'd say, this high information flow network of rich communities, that's my own favorite way of putting it, right? But that brings together a lot of riches, a lot of resources, not everything, but it brings together a lot, and all the way through an account of what on earth does it mean for something to be true, right? Or are there any values that have any grounding? Questions like that, all of those sorts of things are plausibly motivated through that lens. And so I think we don't have that lens. I think that we need a lens like that lens. And that's just a favorite way of sewing those things together. Okay. But then it turns out, where does that road lead? And the problem is it leads in directions people have generally not gone. It leads in the direction of well then, gee, I mean, why don't you get a group of people and try and figure out the whole world together? That's sort of the limit, right? And try to live it out and gain expert experience being like this, seeing the world like this, right? That's a remarkable ideal. Who on earth is doing that, right? I mean, it's just not what we do.
Yeah.
So if you were going to do it, where would it go? And that's why we need a second and a third lens. That's why we need to show that, in fact, there are lenses. They work this way. You can put them together. It's very difficult to build any of them on your own, by the way, right? You're bringing in all kinds of resources from all sorts of different folks, right? When you're putting these things together. But you start to put them together, and it seems to me you start to notice this is what we need to do next. Can you really have separate lenses? I don't mean separate in the sense that together they have no implications together. Quite the contrary, they do. But can you articulate them separately enough so that you can count a turn for pedagogical purposes almost, so that you can take a turn around the ring and call yourself done, right, with one lens, something like that. I don't even know what I mean by a turn around the ring. I just mean there's a wholeness, as Aristotle says in the Poetics, a whole, right? A whole plot has got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you're done, and okay, I get it. And this works for me. And I don't have to bring in this other stuff, not yet.
Yeah.
So those would be units, but those are pedagogical units. And that's why I think you have to find structure of things that hold together and figure out ways, not just to persuade somebody of one proposition, but to persuade them of three in close sequence, right? So that together they can see the world differently through them, right? In the way that we just sort of tried thinking about for international relations.
Yeah.
And then it turns out this isn't easy going. I mean, just to talk the way through that first lens was 2 hours of blah, right? 2 hours of monologue. Some of that was setting up the project, but an hour and a half of it up, that was just interrelating all those things, just motivating all those, and there's only a dozen pieces.
Yeah.
That was just a sketch. And that's a bit of a problem. Making that more efficient is necessary. So also is building a second lens. So also is putting those things together, solving problems with each separately, solving problems with the two of them together.
Yeah.
Showing all of that, and then packaging something that's interesting enough that people are willing to climb through and take that journey, so as to be attracted to the way of life that produces lenses like that and cooperates out of lenses like that on common projects.
Yeah.
That's the sort of the social revolution prescription.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me rattle here at the end.
Oh yeah.
Why
No.
we got where we're heading.
I think that was a great 5-minute or 10-minute summary of your 2-hour one, if you're looking for yeah, I guess a thought that pops into my head, jumping back to the screw tape letters, one of the things he tries to get his patient to do, I forget what he calls his
Wormwood.
Well, yeah, Wormwood, but he's trying to get his man to do something. Don't they have a phrase for? So Wormwood is the nephew of a older devil of Uncle Screwtape, and he has a man. Is it? Do they have a different phrase for it?
No, right. It's like his subject is his target is that's not
target,
the phrase,
yeah.
right? But that's the field.
Yeah, I remember one of the chapters is about trying to get him to become a connoisseur of churches, right? And so, I'm imagining churches as lenses, and a temptation could be to become a connoisseur of lenses without ever actually building anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. David Foster Wallace talks about that in some of his books too. That's sort of his theme.
Academia.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah.
Or call
some
it
way, it could be academia.
About the Athenians? They spend all their time they just want to hear another story. They just want to hear something new.
Oh, I don't.
Paul in his letter to the Athenians, I think.
Oh.
Wait a minute. There is no
letter the Athenians?
Letter to he's talking about Athens. Honestly, he is, but it's in another letter. What letter is that in? I don't remember.
Letter to the Athenians.
goodness. Yeah, I love
Apocryphal.
it.
That's awesome.
Gosh. Yeah, that's a fun mistake to make. You don't make it on. Right.
Right after his letter to the Macedonians, and
Sure.
That's funny. Anyway, yeah.
And the Bacchanalians. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we could quit if you're up. We could keep going, but
Sure.
You're right. Let's not do that. So that's why it really helps to try to articulate these things and to try and cut them down. If we can do it with a few propositions instead of so many.
Yeah.
And and that depends on who you want to attract in a way. If you want to attract people who spend all their time thinking about all these things, you might want to at least convey the idea. You want to convey some confidence that there are some resources for addressing some tough questions from multiple points of view, but not from every point of view, right? And not every question. I always have in mind the people that I've hung around with in academic life who read McIntyre and who really wish they could do something to bring about a better state of affairs. And they keep going to conferences about it. And they do things, but mostly, I think it's fair to say, mostly they go to conference and write papers about it. Mostly. Because that's what's known. That's the job you can get. That's the acknowledged, that's the pathway. There's a glide path for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just get tenure first and then I'll do some stuff if you're in academic life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't, when do you have time to think about these things? And when you have time, who takes 90 minutes 3 days a week and talks it through?
Right.
Hard to come by.
Yeah.
But thanks to COVID.
Here we are.
Right?
The powerful COVID wildfire combo.
That's right. All right. I'll let you go. Please say hello to Aaron, and when you see him, Matt.
Will do.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See you, Uncle Tom.
Appreciate the time. Yep. Bye.